Yeah, right. I'm not gonna throw it at you guys. Welcome back to the Remnant Christian Book Reading Channel. I hope you guys are ready for another little adventure. Today, we're gonna be reading once again The Elijah Project. We're almost done with it. We're almost done with this book, which is awesome, but at the same time, it might be a little bit not awesome for whoever is really enjoying the book. Now, there's two things that I have a problem with. Two things, y'all. First is the fact that the next book, I'm still not sure what I'm gonna do. Now, if you're watching this in the future, you know, when there's flying cars and all of that, maybe you already know what's next. But me at this current moment in the present time, I have no idea what I'm doing next. Whether that be the oath, the visitation, or maybe something different. You know, I have a library of books there, but not every single book is good for the channel, if you know what I mean. Um, so yeah, uh, I say let's get right into it, right? Right? Let's go ahead and get right into it. If you hear any weird sounds in the background, I'm sorry because you know, it stinks to have that. But anyways, let's get right into it, okay? So the chapter we're doing right now is chapter 7 or whatever chapter it is. To the rescue again, sorta. That's the title of this chapter. We're going to do chapter 7 and 8 today. Maybe chapter 9 also if I'm feeling up to it. We'll see. Uh, so yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Chapter 7, To the Rescue. Again, sorta. Elijah felt the football snap into his little hands. Only they weren't so little anymore. Now they were a man's hands. A big man's hands. He dropped back from the line of players, his muscular legs powerful and poised for action. He was no longer wimpy little Elijah, the pipsqueak that everyone made fun of. Thanks to the chamber, he now towered 6 feet 5 inches high and had the body of a superstar athlete. He glanced to the turf below and saw the Super Bowl logo. He was the star quarterback playing in the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl, excuse me. The stadium was packed with cheering fans. But it wasn't the fans that thrilled him. He'd overcome wanting to be loved by the masses back at the concert. Instead, it was the new power, or the power of his new magnificent body. He looked downfield and saw his receivers trying to break free from the defense, trying to open themselves up for a pass. He glanced to the scoreboard, 14-14, with 8 seconds left in the game. This was the final play. It all depended on him. Two giant linemen, 300 pounds each, broke through the line and charged toward him. He looked back downfield. His teammates still weren't open. There was only one choice. Tucking the ball under his massive arm, the mighty Elijah pivoted to the right and broke towards the left, heading for the only opening he saw. But that opening was immediately filled by another giant opponent who charged toward him. Still, he was no match for Elijah's speed and agility. Elijah faked to the right and continued to the left. The giant lunged and grabbed for his jersey. But Elijah spun free and raced through the hole. More arms reached for him. A pair grabbed at his legs, but he leapt away and continued running. A tunnel formed ahead of him. His blockers were finally clearing a path. His legs pumped and he sprinted forward. He would have to push his body to the very edge. But that was what it was for. Another player came at him from the left. Elijah turned on the afterburners and jetted away like a rocket. Nothing could stop him. The goalposts shimmered 60 yards ahead. The tunnel narrowed. He picked up speed. There was no end to his power. 50 yards. The crowd was on their feet, roaring. 40 yards. The adrenaline pumped. His heart pounded. 30 yards. The roar was deafening. He could go on like this forever. What a fantastic body! What awesome power! He had never imagined this strength and power, and now it was all his. The good news was that Piper had finally managed to shift the RV into forward. The bad news was, well, that Piper had finally shifted the RV into forward. Minutes later, thanks to Willard's directions, they were heading down the mountain road to Motel 3 to rescue Zack. She wasn't exactly sure what they'd do once they found him, or how to find Elijah, or how to find her parents. But at the moment, none of that mattered, because right now, she had other things on her mind. Like, look out! Turn right! Staying alive. She yanked the wheel to the right, pulling the RV back into her lane and out of the oncoming traffic with the approaching honk semi-truck. It was a good move. That was not so good when she turned. What was not so good, excuse me, was when she turned too hard, which meant she not only swerved to her side of the road, but also beyond, toward the 800-foot drop-off directly in front of them. Left! Cody shouted, grabbing at the wheel with his good arm. Turn left! Left! Right! Make up your mind! Piper yelled as she cranked the wheel hard to the left and barely missed the drop-off. Unfortunately, she cranked too hard, swerving back into the wrong lane and right into the path of the school bus loaded with kids. Ooh. Ah! Cody yelled. Ah! Piper yelled. Ah! The kids agreed. Once again, Piper yanked the wheel, and once again she barely missed death, though the side mirror on the school bus wasn't so lucky. How many more miles? Piper asked, a note of desperation in her voice. Cody didn't answer. How many more? She turned to him and stopped. She figured it was rude to interrupt someone whose eyes were closed and who was praying for his life. Not that she blamed him. In fact, it made so much sense that she turned back to the road and tried it too. Not that she closed her eyes, though at this rate she wasn't sure how much difference it would make, but she did start to pray. Reverend Festal was pretty steamed when Zack gave him the answers that offered proof of the Bible's accuracy. But it didn't stop him. Instead, he came at Zack with a whole new argument. What about Jesus? What do you mean? Zack asked. So what if the Bible accurately recorded what he said and did? What if he was lying? What if he was just out to fool people? Zack looked at the Reverend. It was another good point. If it did. Hold on. Hold on. Excuse me. I lost myself there. I'm back. Zack looked at the Reverend. It was another good point. Even if the Bible did quote Jesus correctly, and even if it did report his miracles, what if he was just a liar? What if all Jesus' miracles were nothing but a bunch of magic tricks to fool people? Before Zack could answer, he felt the cell phone in his pants pocket start to vibrate. Excuse me. He rose from the table. I need to use the bathroom for a sec. Take your time, the Reverend said, and think about what I've been saying. He gave Zack a smile. After all, these are very important questions. The roar of the crowd filled Elijah's ears. Just a few more yards, and he would cross the goal line and win the Super Bowl. He didn't know how much of his magnificent body was his imagination or how much of it had become real. But even as he ran toward the end zone, he began to wonder how long it would last. How long would he be in such fabulous shape? 10 years? 20? Sure, that was a long time, but it wasn't forever. Because everybody gets old. And everybody dies. The goal line lay 20 yards ahead. He remembered his grandfather, another great athlete, strong as an ox. He also remembered him dying last year as a shriveled old man. Then there was Elijah's father. Even he was starting to get old. It happened to everybody. As great as Elijah's body was, it wouldn't last forever. Nothing lasted forever. 15 yards to go. But that wasn't true. There was something that lasted forever. If he obeyed God, there were the people he would touch, the people he would lead to God, the people whose lives would be changed forever. 10 yards. Sure, he could have he could have the fantastic body now and get all the trophies and awards. But in a few years, who would remember or care? And after that, after he was dead, it's not like he could pack his fancy body and trophies into a coffin and take them to heaven. 5 yards. But changed lives. Those he could take to heaven. And if he obeyed, if he did what God wanted him to, there would be thousands of those lives. Suddenly, the choice appeared very easy. A moment of greatness now, or an eternity of greatness later. Hmm. Elijah made up his mind. As he did, the roar of the crowd started to fade. He dug his cleats into the turf and veered for the right. Instead of crossing the goal line, he headed off the field. Only it was no longer a field. Now it was turning into a smooth floor, the floor of the chamber. His powerful legs continued to drive his body toward the stadium's exit. Only it was no longer a stadium. Now it was becoming the glass case. But he did not stop. He lowered his shoulder and slammed into the glass. It shattered and fell all around him. "Look what you've done!" Shadow Man shouted. "Look what you've done!" Elijah knew his body had never changed, that it was all in his imagination, in his mind. But his body didn't know. Not yet. Still, thinking he was strong, he leapt from the chamber and raced past Shadow Man toward the door. But before he even arrived, the big bodyguard appeared, blocking his exit. Or at least he tried. Remembering his moves on the field, Elijah faked to the right, and the big man lunged for him. Then Elijah pivoted to the left, slipping past the man and sprinting down the hallway. "Stop him!" Shadow Man screamed. "Don't let him get away!" Elijah began wheezing, trying to catch his breath. Making fancy moves was one thing, but he was not the mighty man who could run forever. He was just a wimpy boy. Still, he would not stop. At the end of the hall, he saw a door, and beyond that, freedom. "Stop him!" Elijah's lungs were on fire. His legs felt like rubber. The edges around his vision started to turn white. He was going to pass out. Still, he ran. He stumbled into the door and opened it. Fresh night air struck his face. An alarm began to sound. Guard dogs barked. Where should he run? What direction? He paused, waiting for an impression, waiting to hear that still small voice that so often directed him into the woods. He turned and staggered toward the forest. He gave us the wrong directions, Piper shouted. There's no way this road leads to any motel. Cody nodded and quickly typed into the computer. Willard, where are we? You told us the wrong way. For the most part, Piper's driving had improved, even in the early evenings with her headlights on. She managed to stay on her side of the road, most of the time. More importantly, she hadn't killed anyone. Yet, if anybody needed proof that prayer really does work, she had it. Now, they were driving through the forest on a dirt road. There were more than enough dips. Slam! Ah! And potholes. Yikes! But somehow, the broken down RV just kept going. The fact that Piper was able to avoid hitting any more trees also came in handy. The fact that a squirrel darted out in front of her was not. Hang on! She shouted. She yanked the wheel hard to the right, and the RV did the usual skidding and sliding out of control while the kids inside did their usual screaming and shouting for their lives. Ah! But somehow Piper straightened them out and they kept going. She looked to the review mirror and called back to Cody. Any news from Willard? Something's coming in! He shouted up to her. What's he say? Hang on! Tell him it looks like he's got us heading back to Shadow Man's headquarters. Oh, brother! Piper looked back into the mirror. What? We've lost the connection. Not now! Cody shook his head. There's no signal. Piper sighed and whispered under her breath. God, what are you doing? Why aren't you helping us? To the right! Cody shouted. He pointed out the window into the darkness. What's that in our field to our right? Piper glanced from the road to an approaching field. A person was running, stumbling into the moonlight. A little person. Elijah! Cody shouted. It's Elijah! Piper's heart skipped a beat. Cody pressed his face against the cold glass. Oh no! He shouted. What? There's a bunch of guys after him. Guys? Piper asked. Yeah, and dogs. Without word, Piper cranked the wheel hard to the right. They bounced off the road and into the open field. Now they were heading straight for Elijah. Ooh, whiff. That was kind of crazy. First of all, Piper's driving. She needs a driving instructor ASAP. I mean, come on now. Well, let's go ahead and get into Chapter 8. Chapter 8. Pickup and Delivery. People never look their best when they're angry. Reverend Festal proved this with his red face and bulging eyeballs. I have studied all my life, he sputtered. I have a PhD in theology. How do you, a mere child, know these things? Zack shrugged. I guess I just did my homework. Oh, and did you also know that Jesus fulfilled over 300 prophecies about himself in the Bible? Some of them were written hundreds, even thousands of years before he was even born. The Reverend's face grew redder. Earlier, when Zack was in the bathroom, he memorized the information that came in over his cell phone. Now, he was reciting it as quickly as he could before he forgot. Those prophecies included everything from his birth in Bethlehem to going to Egypt, to his healing people, to his death on the cross between two thieves, to his resurrection, and on and on. He could have manipulated those things, Festal said, to fulfill those prophecies. Zack smiled. Maybe. But the chances of one person fulfilling only the top 8 prophecies about Jesus in the Bible are something like 1 in 100 quadrillion. You're you're making that up. Nope. Those are the same odds you'd get if you covered the whole state of Texas with silver dollars 2 feet deep, painted one red, tossed it in the center, stirred up the pile, and gave a blind man one chance to pick out the red one. That's impossible! Reverend Festal shouted. He was so worked up that he even managed to draw Monica and her thugs away from the Brady grandchildren revisited. You're right, Zack agreed. That is impossible. Unless, of course, he really was who he said he was. Unless he was really God. No! Festal was on his feet. He was a good teacher, I'll give you that, but he certainly wasn't God. Wrong again. Jesus claimed to be God over and over. A good teacher wouldn't claim that. Maybe a con artist, maybe a nutcase, but no way would a good teacher claim to be God, unless, of course, he really was. This is ridiculous, Festal sputtered. I don't have to stand for this. He turned and started toward the door. Where do you think you're going? Monica shouted. I'll not be instructed by a mere boy. He opened the door. Monica headed towards him. Shadow Man gave you direct orders. Festal came to a stop. Would you dare defy him? Well, no. You have a job to do. I suggest you finish it. But Shadow Man is turning his brat of a brother at the compound. Your orders are to turn this one. If you don't, there will be serious consequences. Festal hesitated. And I think you know what it means, or what I mean by serious. The Reverend wilted. He turned and shuffled slowly back to the table. Fortunately, he was so distraught that he forgot to close the door, leaving it wide open. That was his big mistake, and Zack's big break. Zack leapt up and raced for the doorway. Monica lunged for him, but grabbed only air as he ran outside into the night. After him! Monica screeched. Zack darted through the parking lot, looking for some way out. Unfortunately, the only way came in the form of a burly tattooed biker standing a few yards from his monster bike, trying to impress a burly tattooed woman. Zack raced to the bike and hopped on. Hey! The burly guy shouted. What do you think you're doing with my bike? Sorry, Zack yelled as he hit start and the engine kicked over. I'll bring it back, I promise! The good news was the biker was so heavy it took him 7.5 seconds to lumber over to the bike. The better news was that Zack had the bike off its stand and the engine revved in 5.25 seconds. The bad news was the bike was a lot more powerful than Zack's motor scooter at home. So powerful, and with such awesome acceleration, that Zack could barely control his wheelie and, of course, his hysterical screaming. Closer! Cody shouted to Piper from the RV's open door. I can't reach him! Closer! Piper kept a careful eye on the side mirror as she brought the moving RV beside her running brother. If they had time, she would have stopped. But the guards were quickly closing in, and the 2 German shepherds were already at Elijah's heels, snapping away. The RV leaped and bucked as it hit ruts and holes. More than once, the wheel nearly jerked out of Piper's hands, but she held on tight. This was her little brother they were trying to save, and nothing would make her let go. Closer! Cody yelled. The dogs were right there. She could hear their growls and snarls. Closer! Another series of bumps, but she held on. Closer! Closer! Got him! She glanced in the mirror and saw Cody pulling Elijah into the RV. She figured the weight was probably killing Cody's bad arm, but he didn't complain. She was surprised that she still heard snarling and growling until she saw that the dog had latched its jaws into Elijah's pant leg and wouldn't let go, even if it meant being hauled on board with Elijah. But the free ride didn't last long. Cody kicked the dog off and slammed the door on it. It took 2 or 3 slams before the dog finally let go. It fell to the ground with a few strangled yelps and then angry barking as the RV sped away. You all right? Piper shouted back to Elijah. The boy nodded. Where to now? Cody yelled. Zach and the motel. Which way? I'm not sure. Piper glanced back and saw that her little brother was pointing to the left. Are you sure? She called. We're supposed to turn left? Elijah nodded. Without questioning, Piper threw the RV into a skidding, sharp turn. Ah! And they headed left. They're going back to Shadow Man's compound! Willard exclaimed as he and the old-timer watched the blip move across the map and on the computer screen. He reached for the keyboard and typed, Don't go back to Shadow Man's headquarters! When he looked at the monitor, he saw that the word don't was somehow missing. Willard scowled and retyped the word, but the computer was jammed. No matter how many times he tried to type it, the word don't just wouldn't appear. What's going on? The old man asked. Your computer is frozen. Really? Willard kept trying to type the word, but had no success. That's strange, the man said. And before Willard could stop him, he reached toward the enter key. No! Willard cried. Not that key! It'll send it! What key? This one here? The hermit asked as he hit the key and sent the message. Yeah, Willard sighed in defeat. That one. Zach had barely managed to get control of the motorcycle when the cell phone began vibrating in his back pocket. He reached in and dug it out. Keeping one eye on the road, he read the tiny screen. Go back to Shadow Man's headquarters. He frowned. It didn't make sense. If there was one place he didn't want to revisit, it was Shadow Man's compound. Still, the instructions over the cell phone hadn't been wrong yet. He slid the cell phone into his pocket and threw the bike into a sharp left, heading toward the compound. A moment later, a pair of headlights bounced into the road behind him. He glanced over his shoulder. It was Monica and her goons. He revved the bike faster and roared down the dark road, but no matter how fast he went, the van stayed on his tail. Piper peered out the windshield. She didn't believe her eyes. What have you done? She shouted back to her little brother. What's wrong? Cody yelled. He's brought us back to the compound, she cried. Elijah, what did you do? The little guy gave no answer except for his usual satisfied grin. Suddenly, Shadow Man's fortress loomed before them. Piper hit the brakes and slid the RV to a stop just a few yards from the front entrance. The area was too small to turn around, so she threw the vehicle into reverse. It would have been a good idea except for the Hummer that suddenly appeared behind them, blocking their path. She wasn't sure how much more abuse the old RV could take, but she had no choice. She stomped on the gas, preparing to ram the Hummer. But the RV didn't move. Not an inch. Instead, its wheels just spun in place. "What's going on?" Cody shouted, his eyes wide and his face white with fear. "Are we stuck?" She blew the hair out of her eyes and pressed the accelerator harder. More spinning, but no movement. Her mind raced, trying to understand. There was no mud, no snow. Why couldn't they move? Suddenly, the side door flew open. She twirled around and had her answer. Shadow Man stood before them, one arm raised toward the RV, holding it in place with his powers. "Welcome, children," he sneered. "So nice of you to return." Piper turned to Elijah. The little guy didn't look frightened, but he was no longer smiling. Dad groaned and tried to move his head, but it seemed to weigh a ton. He forced his eyes open and saw the blur of a hospital room. With lots of effort, he finally rolled his head to the side and saw another bed. And his wife. "Jude." His tongue was so thick, no words came. "Jude." He heard, a small beep on the other side of him and a nurse's voice. "Doctor, the husband is coming around." Answered through the intercom. "It's time for another dose. Give one to both of them." "Yes, doctor." Dad tried to move, but his body felt like lead. He opened his mouth and forced out the word, "No." "It's all right," the nurse said. "You'll be just fine." "No." He saw the glint of a needle in the dim light. Desperately, he tried to move, not to save himself, but his wife. "Steady now." He felt the tiny burn of the needle. "No." There we go. Once again, his eyes grew heavy. No matter how he tried, he could not keep them open. They closed, and the silence returned. The compound came into Zach's view. So did the Hummer and RV. He immediately hit the brakes. Unfortunately, Monica's van behind him wasn't quite as quick, which would explain the screech followed by the thud of it slamming into the back of Zach's bike and throwing it forward. Zach yelled as he hung onto the handlebars. He managed to steer clear of the Hummer but had to dump the bike in order to miss the RV. He came to a sliding stop at Shadow Man's feet. Monica's van wasn't quite so lucky. It slammed head on into the rear of the Hummer. Of course, the Hummer was barely scratched, but the van didn't survive as well. Now it looked like a crunched accordion with steam rising from it. Unfortunately, that didn't stop Monica from prying herself out of the metal accordion and screaming, "You moron! Who taught you to drive?" "Nobody," Silas said as he stumbled out after her. "Well, it shows! Where's Bruno?" There was no answer. She turned back to the van. "Bruno?" Finally, the big lug crawled out and tumbled to the ground. Monica raced to him. "Bruno? Bruno?" The man was definitely dazed. "Bruno!" He grinned foolishly at her. "That was fun, Mommy. Can we go on the ride again?" "Silence!" Shadow Man demanded. Bruno fell silent. So did everyone else. "You will come with me," he ordered, "and bring the children." Leaning closer to Elijah, he hissed,
And you thought you destroyed my chamber, did you?
Elijah blinked.
You did not destroy it, my little friend. You have only increased its rage, so everyone can enjoy its power.
Woof! That was the end of chapter 8. Wow. 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 So, let's summarize here. All right, let's summarize here, okay? Zach escaped. Willard told him to go back to the compound because the computer didn't let him type the word don't. So now Zach is in the compound. Piper, Cody, and Elijah are in the compound. And dad and mom are getting drugged, essentially, in a hospital. I mean, what's going on here? What is God's plan for Elijah and his family and friends right now? I guess the only way we'll ever know is if you come back and watch the next episode on the Remnant Christian Book Reading Channel. Okay, enough with the silliness. For real though, what did you guys think about that? That was kind of crazy. I was going to read, like I said earlier in the video, chapter 9, but doing Shadows Man's voice when he was yelling actually really hurt my throat. So I'm gonna take a break. Yeah, it didn't feel good in my throat. I feel like my throat is uh is dying. But yeah. A lot of crazy stuff. What do you think about what's his name? I forgot. Zach said to Reverend Festal. Oh my gosh. You know, it's one thing if the Reverend would actually acknowledge that he's wrong, but it's another thing that he's just so adamant that he's not. You know, it just goes to show, that people who say they have PhDs or who actually do have PhDs in theology not always seem to know the truth, if that makes sense. But with all of that said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Be sure to like and comment. If you enjoy these videos, make sure you subscribe. I haven't done a little like, comment, and subscribe thing in so long. You hear those sirens? It's telling you to hurry up and subscribe. Anyway, let me stop being silly. You all have a good night, day, or evening, afternoon, whatever time it is for you all. God bless you all. And remember that Jesus loves you. Bye.